I'm so excited to be here with Kristin Hersh. Kristin, thank you so much for being with us. You are somebody I have been a fan of for decades, and I'm just so excited to be here with you tonight and talk about the history of the Throwing Muses and some of the wonderful, exciting solo stuff that you're involved in. So thanks again.
No, thank you, Jason.
And we're here actually in Los Angeles at the Bootleg Theater, and it's the second night. Last night you guys took the stage, and how did that go? Tell us a little bit about last night's performance.
It was funny. I remember telling a lot of stories about some psycho redneck tour bus driver we had named JW, who never learned my name. He called me Crystal from Throwing Muses for the whole year we were on his bus.
Wow. I'm going to start a band called Crystal and the Throwing Music.
Yeah,
that would be very cool, like a tribute band or something, right? Yeah.
Yep, my permission to do so. He was a bus driver who was afraid to take left turns, so it was a long tour.
Like OCD, kind of like had bad mojo.
Can't drive.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
OCD's up here, can't drive's down here.
Down on the pendulum. You know, this is we're looking at 30 plus years of the Throwing Muses being together. Looking back at that era, you know, when you guys were teenagers in high school, could you imagine yourself 30 years later playing with Tanya and Dave, you know, and doing this?
Actually, I think so, but not for any other reason than that I couldn't imagine doing anything else. We just were, and it was. And now we still are, and it still is. But we've come and gone, as you do if you're not playing the game.
Yeah.
But people who play the game come and go too. So we've just stayed in the corner of the business. And in fact, we removed ourselves from the business for the last decade because we so disagree with how it was being run. And we were watching it fall, and we knew the paradigm needed shifting. And so we did that in private. All the music we played was for people. We played shows and we recorded and we wrote, but not until we were fully listener supported were we able to make this record that we just made.
And I wanted to talk about that a lot because Purgatory in Paradise, highly ranked. Pitchfork Media gave it, I think, 8 point something out of 10, and that really great critical feedback. And I know that I had read some statements where you said that this was really the first album that you and the band felt completely satisfied with because it was really sort of supported by the listeners, kind of crowdsourced, and perhaps no big record label pressures on the content this time.
I personally, I didn't feel the pressures. I thought they were stupid because they're inane, and they were very clear. You know, you are not hot enough to be a musician. Your music is not dumb enough. You know, that's something that you reject out of hand. I wanted to keep working. But I fought my way off Warner Brothers, bought my way off Warner Brothers to make sure I could work in the right capacity, really, and without an ear to the marketability of the product, which my listeners would reject. If I gave them something marketable, they'd hate it, you know, and that's what we were. When Warner Brothers admitted, they said, well, we're not going to try to sell your records. We have Throwing Muses on our roster so that we can sign other bands that like you. So we were always a critics band. We're a musicians band, and that can sound a little pretentious, but that's only because the music had been dumbed down so bad by a corrupt corporate industry. It really should never have been.
At what point in your career did you feel those corporate pressures? I mean, was it more in the 90s, like the University album, or was it like, Real Ramona? I don't remember what label that was on.
Yeah, it was all Warner Brothers, but University was after I had freed us, or I gave them my solo record in exchange for our freedom, and then found out that I was the only member signed, so it was my own freedom. And University was our most successful record, which I made free of all of those trappings, but for Warner Brothers. So it was sort of a nice goodbye and a nice blend of the big money that buys shelf space before the internet and before music we could just be let go in the ether, and then this sort of, well, you know, what the hell, we can do whatever we want. And oddly, that was our most successful record.
One of the patterns I've talked to a lot of folks that really sort of in the early 90s and then up to the mid 90s had a great resurgence of success because of more corporate record label interest in alternative music. Everybody always references Nirvana and all that, but there was definitely, in the early to mid 90s, kind of alternative music was more marketable, and a lot of bands that were very indie in the 80s luckily got more exposure. But for some bands, it was perhaps like dancing with the devil a little bit at times. I don't know if that...
A lot, because what Nirvana taught people was just insert a chorus here, insert a hook here, like play this game, play by these rules. Yeah. It wasn't Kurt's fault, but it dumbed down a lot of more idiosyncratic missions that could have gone places and didn't. And they made them into one-hit wonders. And I'm now with an overview of this industry that really began when the Carter family started collecting songs and then demanding money when people play them. Okay. Just sort of like, oh, no, this is a spontaneous human venture. You don't grab it and you don't attach a name and an ego to it. But here we are having done so for so long that we're just used to its effects. And what usually happens is that there is this pinpoint of inspiration that is very idiosyncratic, and it seems to fall out of the sky and burst out of the ground, and it is eventually part of this kind of zeitgeist feel of a scene that's not necessarily geographically based. And it takes about 10 or 15 years for the industry to catch up with the watered down, muted version of it. And that's what we hear. And unfortunately, that's what Nirvana began, was just an imitation of what we had been listening to 10 or 15 years earlier.
Yeah, and I was going to say, a lot of respect to Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, but one of the things I actually really respect about him is he was not... he did not try to hide. He wore his musical influences on his sleeve. Sometimes literally, he'd wear the Daniel Johnson shirts. He got the K Records tattoo. And he often referenced folks like the Pixies, which you have a very long and wonderful history.
Really nice to me. He was great to Throwing Muses. And he didn't want to be one of those guys. Yeah. And yet... there's a different focus when you are. I grew up with the Pixies, and they were dear friends, and their focus was, we will be rock stars like this. This will happen, and we're going to do it this way. And they did it in a very cool way. But we came from this planet where we only spoke our own language, and we could have just stared at each other in our practice space, speaking it to each other, and getting off on the sound. And we never really learned to step outside of it and, I guess, market it or stylize it. We stayed there on that planet. There were forays into, dumbing it down, because I knew Warner Brothers would drop us if we didn't give them a dumb single, so we give them a dumb single. And but it was really, doing that is not playing the game. It's just like throwing them a stupid bone and then getting back to work. And that's not very effective in the industry. But it means that we're still living on that planet, getting off on it, for better or for worse.
It ebbs and flows, doesn't it? And it's just about kind of riding the wave to some extent. And
it's listening. You can't be about making noise until you're about listening.
Well, you mentioned Kurt Cobain, and not to belabor the point, but just a couple months ago was sadly the 20th anniversary of his untimely passing. And some artists are able to adapt to the pressures of popularity and success. And Kurt was one that, definitely had issues with that. And it was pretty well known, some of his writings and stuff about the challenges of making it big. And as an artist, is it something that you kind of have struggled with through the years, that periods where you got more exposure, more popularity, maybe through mainstream outlets, where you started to kind of question yourself about, am I staying pure? Am I staying true?
Well, not because we were popular. We never felt popular, but when I wrote a dumb single, we just thought it was a joke. And we thought they would laugh, and they didn't laugh. It became our single, and we just sort of ignored it. And I still regret having crawled through the mud to meet them halfway. But no, we never felt pressures of success or anything like. We were always losers, and it's an important club to be in. It's like we were not going to try. That was just lame.
Very cool. I'm glad to announce that I'm part of the loser club and I'm in good company. So yes, I belong. Crystal and the Throwing Music. I'm the lead singer. Yeah. So awesome. Well, Kristin, I wanted to talk a little bit, if you're okay, chatting a little bit about it. But you've also been just a wonderful. I'm very personally very much respect some of your efforts to bring sort of awareness to things around like mental health issues and trauma issues and the need for treatment for folks. And I know through a lot of your writings and things like that, you've tried to and being very open and personal disclosures too. Really tried to reduce some of the stigma attached to folks that are maybe dealing with some different issues from trauma or whatever maybe they've experienced. And a lot of folks now, especially with veterans, a lot of veterans are coming back from the war and they're dealing with PTSD, they're dealing with trauma, they're dealing with dissociative things, and there's a big need for treatment, And so have you gotten feedback from folks who come up to you and just say, thank you so much for sharing your story. I was living with kind of similar things, and now I feel really inspired to like share my story too? Or?
Yeah, mostly from people who have kept the stigma alive. In fact, the people who have to hide it, who have to get out of bed when they don't want to, who have children who are working as teachers and doctors and working to sell donuts and working in drugstores, like people who are needed.
Yeah.
And they have a very difficult time wallowing. They're not allowed to lose themselves, and that battle is the one I relate to. I have 4 children, and I never stop working, and the dissociative issue is one of just terrible secrets that dirty your form, your psychology, your physiology. Is I don't want to say ruined my life, but my goodness, it's when I went through EMDR, it's like I lost 100 pounds of history.
And what we're talking about actually is EMDR, which is a form of treatment for trauma. It's it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and it's considered one of the best practices in dealing with trauma and dissociative issues like that. And you're right that I heard people talk about that it takes its toll. I mean, by that type of therapy, you're accessing things, deep memories, real somatic memories, and for folks that maybe had some early childhood experiences, childhood abuse is commonly sadly one of the things that comes up a lot. There's a lot of things that folks dissociate from as a coping mechanism, and sometimes it brings that back, but it allows you to reprocess it and gain a sense of control over it, right?
Yeah, a coping to survival mechanism. And for me, the other personality was music. So I have never had any memory of having written any song. I had no memory of any of the traumas in my life except from above. I had no emotional attachment to any of them. And I didn't know what my songs were about. So what it released was a barrage of trauma, and it was, I mean, your whole psyche is geared toward avoiding those traumas, and I thought it would kill me. I thought the pain would kill me.
Yeah. It's a survival mechanism. It's a coping skill, and sometimes coping skills, they're functional at some point in time, but sometimes they become a little unwieldy.
Exactly. And like many disorders, it is adaptive and then maladaptive.
Exactly. Well, I had read about that, Kristin, that at times you framed some of your, especially earlier on, your musical output is you sort of being a vessel or channeling something that you weren't fully present with in the moment, and it kind of dissociated from, and that's, I find that really fascinating, that one of what you've identified as one part of your personality, or one personality, was kind of the primary conduit for that strength and that emotional expressiveness.
I was a very nice lady that would scream and yell for a living, and that's all anybody knew about me. I'm a little frustrated that there wasn't a single professional in all these audiences for 30 years that could see me shifting personalities in a classic fashion, where I would start to shiver and freeze and then go glassy-eyed and stare and not be present. And then in between songs, I'd be me and I could talk again, and then I would disappear. It was classic dissociative. And my drummer now says, well, yeah, we knew. I mean, we knew that wasn't you when we were playing. And people in journalists would I guess they thought I was speaking metaphorically when I would say I have no idea this is what's going on when I play. I'm not there. I disappear.
Yeah. And I had read also that you've mentioned that the cliche of the tortured artist, the artist with mental health issues is so cliched, and that it sadly kind of overshadows the reality, and it's something people can hide behind or play up, that I'm just this artistic, dissociated, distant artist, and that's why I'm artistic, and it kind of belittles or discredits the reality of when that is a real phenomenon for folks, right?
Oh yeah, I get so angry, and I probably shouldn't, because I know there's overlap, and yet I don't think they are allowing for how it feels to truly be broken, to truly be sick, to truly be suffering, to have to be here and live through what you can't. It's insulting, and I have a hard time thinking that there's any clarity to be gained from that kind of fuzziness, and yet I have to admit it does seem to free you from your physical limitations. There's a certain amount of mind expansion that has to coincide with that kind of therapy.
And some people a certain level of distancing or dissociation is very normal. I do it, when I'm stressed, and some people smoke or they drink or whatever. And so sometimes people do it through drugs, sometimes people do it psychologically to sort of remove themselves or dissociate, just as a way of getting out of their skin when it's uncomfortable to be in their skin.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Not being happy in your own skin. I mean, that's what this plane is all about.
Well, Kristin, in light of all of that, I think it's so wonderful. I really feel like celebrating the fact that, you as an artist, as a mom, as an author, as a very creative, wonderful woman, and as a bandmate to some other very cool, amazing musical performers, are still doing your thing. And you're out here, and you're I hate to use the cliche, a role model, but because I know there's a lot of pressure in saying that, but for folks to see you and go, yeah, she's had struggles. We've all had struggles. And I'm pushing forward. I'm going to put something out into the world, whether it's a creative output or whether it's, to not sit by and let yourself become overwhelmed by the struggles that you're dealing with.
And also to refrain from striving. I think you have to be about the work and not about what happens afterwards.
Okay. Sort of kind of a Zen-like, just be present, but not...
It has to be. The work has to boss you around, and if you have any ego involvement, you're not going to let that happen. And it will suck, and you shouldn't suck.
I shouldn't suck. I'm going to write that in my personal journal here. Well, Kristin, kind of just talking about the future too. What's going on. I know that you're going to be doing some solo shows, words and music shows, going to Australia, and I also wanted to talk a little bit about the Cash Music sort of Kickstarter crowdsourced thing that you and I think your ex-husband Billy maybe did a couple years ago, right? Got that up and running as a mechanism for independent artists to get some exposure and to get some support for putting out musical works.
Yeah, we liked the idea that the listeners be the record company in this closed circle of gratitude, that they fund the music and then get it for nothing and come to the shows for free, and it becomes this it's actually putting the work on a pedestal where it belongs, and there's nothing to be gained except the satisfaction of having music happen between you, which is what happens live. And recorded music has never been able to play that game before, and now it can.
Very cool. Well, that's a very liberating thing for a lot of bands out there, hopefully, that want to get more exposure to touch base with Kristin and personally call her at home and ask her at 3 a.m. I'm sure she'd love answering your calls. But so here in the future, Kristin, what can we expect from you? No pressure, because we were just talking about that. I don't want to make you, oh my God, I'm going to have a complex about it. But anything that fans, you're going to be touring, doing some solo stuff. Any plans for any more? You are an accomplished author. You had a book from a couple years ago called Rat Girl, right? And just any creative plans here for the near future that folks can be on the lookout for?
There's a 50-foot wave record in the can, ready to be released as soon as the Throwing Muses hullabaloo has died down a bit. And I'm just finishing a solo record that's about to be mixed. And I'm just finishing a book about Vic Chestnut. Yeah, I'm writing 3 books at the same time. I was hoping that 2 would suck so I could just finish the good one. And they all sort of sucked about the same. So, and then the Vic one just shown, so I had to finish that. That was actually commissioned, so I had to make it not suck. And Vic would be really mad if I wrote a bad book about him.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Wow, okay, so you are some really amazing, actually written content output that you're involved in as an author. So very exciting stuff.